Okay, well, why don't we get started? My name is Carl Teichman. I'm Director of Government and Community Relations with Illinois Wesleyan, and it's the university along with the museum that sponsors the Lunch and Learn programs. Today, I'm pleased to have two of my colleagues from our Math department join us. First person is Zahia Drici, who is our Chairperson and Professor of Math, and her colleague as well, Dan Roberts, who is the associate professor of mathematics at Illinois Wesleyan as well. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Zahia and Dan. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Candace Summers and Carl Teichman for inviting us to give this presentation. We're delighted to be here, and we hope you will enjoy the talk. So we're here to talk to you about mathematical solutions to real-world problems. And of course, we're doing this in the context of what Dan and I do every day, which is teach mathematics to undergraduate students. And what we also do is try to get our students prepared for life after Illinois Wesleyan. So we're hoping that we give them real world experiences as much as possible so that when they are out in the real world, they're ready to hit the ground running. So to do that, so in that context, what we thought we would share with you is two things. One is how we try to bring the real world to our students and also bring our students to the real world. So in order to share that with you, we thought we would, the way we have structured the talk is in three parts. So the first part would be to give you examples of how we do bring the real world to our students. The second part is to show you how we have structured, to show you how we have structured our curriculum to incorporate in a more systematic way, as making it a really part of the curriculum to provide opportunities for real-world experiences for our students. In the traditional approach to our curriculum, we did more of bringing, or at least trying to bring, the real world to our students. And over the past several years, we have made a lot of efforts to take our students outside the Illinois bubble, if you will. So the talk is structured that way. So first, we're going to show you examples of how we have attempted to bring the real world to our students. We do that in several ways, right? So one thing we've done over the years is to bring back alumni to talk to our students about their path, what their trajectory, what they've done, and how they're using mathematics currently in their job. We also invite guest speakers to come to campus, guest speakers from all, professionals, scientists, community leaders, etc. And what the slides that you see here is showing you is another way we try to bring the real world to our classrooms and to our students is through projects that we give in our courses. So here, we mentioned just a few: topology, statistics, graph theory. Topology can be used for recognizing gerrymandering. For example, I taught this course last spring, it was, and students chose then to work on robotics and guided automated vehicles. And I think what's happening here in town was also motivated by that, but they worked on projects like that. Statistics, the standard things, insurance, setting insurance premiums, and then graph theory. An example is optimizing delivery schedules. Other courses, I could go through most of our upper level courses and give you some examples of that. In the standard courses, students, we have to wait a few weeks for students to get the theoretical background, and then the second part of the course, we get them involved in a real world project. So time is limited. So we try to move away from textbook problems, but still, it's within a semester. What you see here are examples of projects that students have worked on in a course devoted specifically to doing mathematical modeling. So this course is non-standard in the sense that there are no exams, no quizzes, we try to mimic the real world, and we pretend we're in a consulting firm in that course. So we spend maybe 3 weeks, sometimes a month, learning the methodology, the modeling, mathematical modeling methodology. And we use case studies. So I try to bring some real world case studies, students learn, and we talk about the methodology and so on. And the rest of the course, so we're set up as a firm. The whole class is the board of directors, if you will. Students may choose project from what I bring to them, a list of projects, but most often students, because I ask them to look at what interests them and what type of project they would want to work on. So, and then they have to write a proposal, they have to write a white paper, and the class as a whole is going to approve the project or not based on are the students qualified, do they have enough experience, do they have enough math background, do they have, etc. The student then present a resume, and so we do the whole thing, right? We really get into it, and students love it. They like doing that. So what I have here is to show you that that course is as close as we can get in the context of our curriculum to real world. So these are projects that students have brought to the class, and they said they wanted to work on. So I'll explain some of these. For example, the controlling the deer population via hunting permits. This was a student in the class who he's from Iowa, and as a hobby, he likes to hunt, and he does that with his father. And that particular semester, he told us that the hunters were unhappy because of the hunting permits. Apparently, some of the hunting permits were given away to non-resident, non-state resident, and so there were a number of issues related to that. The farmers were not happy with the way the damage was assessed, and all kinds of problems that he brought to us, and he wanted to work on this problem, and he did. And the good thing was that we had the consultant, real life, consultant, his father and his father's friend were giving us the perspective from the hunters. The student had contacted the local authorities because there was also a question of who has the authority to set the quotas, and they had contacted an ecologist. So they did all that, and we came up with a model, and that was good. That tells you how long I have been here in town. The problem you see with the intersection there, I don't know if you remember Towanda, the intersection Towanda-Emerson used to be a 4-way stop sign. And there was a discussion in the local news of traffic light were going to be put in place, and students wanted to work on that. And they went and got all the data, talked to the city, officials, and they went to the intersection with their stopwatch, measuring, at different times of the day, how many cars were going, etc. So they worked on that project. The Social Security, I was the one who brought the article from the New York Times, because there was, the never-ending discussion of will the Social Security go bankrupt. And I didn't think they would be interested, but they were. I mean, one student in class said, I don't know much about it, but I know her grandfather would mention it from time to time, and she didn't know what that was all about. And so she managed to convince a couple of students in class, and they worked on it. Airline overbooking, that was a student whose father was in Chicago working as a highly ranked administrator in one of the airlines. I think it was United. It's a few years back. And she wanted to understand the overbooking. Why do airline overbook? And again, we had consultants, from, of course, they couldn't share real data, but they directed students to resources, to people they could talk to, and that was a very successful project. The Ebola project was when the epidemic was going on in West Africa. And that too was an amazing thing because students could, they had real life data. They would check the CDC website, they would check the New York Times at the time was getting the hard paper copy of the New York Times, and they would bring it to class. And it was just an amazing thing to see. And they take the project and run away with it. I mean, especially if you give them a chance to choose something they're passionate about or they're interested about. And so that's the, what we do in class. And this is a course that we try to offer as frequently as possible. And then, okay, so this is bringing students, well, let's see. I wanted to tell you about, bringing students to it. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, we can move on. This is, now I want to tell you, so this is the second part. How do we take our student to the real world, right? We wanted them to go to the workplace, talk to scientists in their environment, talk to community leaders, have a sense of what type of real world problems are there and what they can learn from that, what they can contribute. So what I have here is a list of things we're trying to address. Students come to us and tell us, I like math, I was very good at math in high school, but I'm not sure what I want to do with a math degree. So we thought we need to give them a sense of, the options in front of them that oftentimes are not clearly articulated for them. We wanted to modernize our curriculum. As I told you, no, I didn't tell you, but I've been here for quite a long time. And you realize that doing things always the same way doesn't work. Students come to us with different interests. Employers tell us they're looking for certain skills, etc. So we try to keep our curriculum modern and dynamic. But most importantly, there are two things. We wanted them, again, to have that experience of working in the real world, being, role playing, etc. So we wanted our student to be, in contact, the lower, because if you look at the courses, what we showed you earlier, those were experiences available to upper level students. The first year sophomore, because of their math background being insufficient to tackle complex problems, they didn't have that opportunity. So we wanted to create something where upper division, lower division students are more talking to each other, working with each other. We wanted the alumni to be part of the experience. We wanted the interdisciplinarity, meaning if a student is interested in more than one major, could they combine their interests, etc. And experience, of course, of speaking, writing to different audiences. And the other important thing is we wanted students to have a sense of place, a sense of taking some responsibility. Things are happening around them, around Illinois Wesleyan. So what is happening? Number one, they need to be informed. Number two, understand the issues. And can they, with the skills they're learning and can they contribute something? So that's, and then the last thing we have there is making informed choices. So very briefly, I'm going to show you the structure of the curriculum. And here it is. So a lot of information here, but mainly what we want to show you is that the first 2 years are where they're exploring. We give them a chance to explore a number of things. And at the end of the sophomore year, they're working on a project related to what they think they're interested in. The next 2 years, now they have explored and they have an idea of what they want to do, and they're preparing their culminating or capstone experience. And we're hoping that by then they have a sense of what they want to do after they graduate, and they're preparing all this. Throughout the 4 years, they're building an e-portfolio, mainly to reflect on their progress, on do they really want to do this, what have they learned, etc., etc. And the portfolio is something then they can use, take with them, and when they're applying for grad school or applying for a job. And very briefly, also we try to help them with transition from high school to us, and then from us to the next thing. So that's basically the structure of the program. But an important thing that we want to put in place, and we have been really working hard, is the student consulting firm. We would like to, and we were trying to put in place a multidisciplinary consulting firm, student consulting firm. We have already received a lot of positive support from alumni, from colleagues across campus. Our alumni are eager to be mentors, to be, so we have a board of directors that we're still trying to populate. But basically, and thanks to Deborah Halperin, she has been an immense resource for us. She has put us in contact with the community. She has helped us do all this. But you see, basically, the upper level, lower level student talking to each other, also connection with community partners, etc. So I'll stop here because I'm keeping an eye on the clock. And the next thing is what we want to show you is examples of current community-based projects that our students are working on. And Dan is going to talk to you about that.
So yeah, I'll jump in for the next part. Thanks, Zahia. So within the consulting firm, we have been working on a couple of different broader projects. So here are the two community partners that we've had so far, with the anticipation of having more, of course. One was the West Market Street Council, and that collaboration was with the intention of supporting the West Market Street Grocery. And then our most recent one is the O'Neill Aquatic Center. So I'll talk about each one individually. So just in case you haven't seen it in the news, there's a grocery that's intended to be built in West Bloomington. If you can see on the map, there's a red star kind of in the central left location. That's where the grocery will be eventually. And it's just off Market Street. And I think that's Morris, the main north-south street that intersects right beside it. So it's pretty close to the intersection of Market and Morris. So this was the first year that we started the student consulting firm. So when we started it, we basically went to Deborah and said, do you know anybody that needs some help in the community that has a problem that we could work on from the analytical side and maybe provide some support for? So we thought about a bunch of different projects, a bunch of different community organizations. And finally, we decided that we thought we were best positioned to help support the grocery. So a little bit of background first. First of all, West Bloomington is designated by the FDA to be a food desert. And what that means is essentially people don't have ready access to healthy, fresh food. They might have access to food, like say at a convenience store or a gas station, maybe like a fast food restaurant, but they don't have ready access to somewhere with, say, a produce department or fresh bread that you can get. And I think the closest grocery around would be either Aldi or Walmart, which are way over across the highway. You can see 74 and 55 over there. And so if you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who might struggle to get to that grocery, like say you're a single parent and you don't have a car, and you need to get to the grocery with your kids, you have to carry your groceries back. It's kind of infeasible to go all the way over to Walmart, even to take the bus over. So proximity to a grocery isn't necessarily the thing that's measured, but it's availability of being able to go to the grocery and get your food. So that was the reasoning for this group, the West Market Street Council, wanting to get a grocery put into West Bloomington. So they worked on it. They got the property purchased and demolished the old building that was there. As far as I know, there hasn't been construction started on the grocery, but hopefully soon it will. So our role was to try to develop some projects for our students that could help support this grocery, kind of taking an analytical approach. So we, being a class, well, actually a few classes, we took a very structured academic approach to it with the intention of having some desired outcome that could directly support the grocery. So this semester, this would be fall 2019, actually. And when I say this semester, that's the one I mean. We formed a mini course cluster of 3 courses. It was a course that I was teaching called Gateway, and that's the one you see with the first year students. It was a course that Zahia was teaching. That was the math modeling course that she was talking about earlier. And then the third course was an environmental ethics course taught by Jim Simeone. And the 3 of us kind of came together to study broadly the food system. And that book on the left that you see, A Framework for Assessing Effects of the Food System, this is a massive, like maybe 400 to 500 page publication by several government agencies like Institute of Medicine, National Research Council. I think the NIH was involved. So anyway, it's a big document. And it was attempting not to directly study the food system, but to provide a framework from which you could jump off to studying the food system, because it's a really complex system, and to try to tackle the whole thing at once is kind of infeasible. So they showed us through this book how you could focus on specific parts by providing a framework that had a few steps, and you go through those and you have this mathematical model that you can use, distribute, and get it to work for you. One of the interesting things that we found was, since Zahia has been teaching this math modeling course for a while, she uses a framework too. And when we both read the framework that was presented in this book, Zahia said, that's exactly what we use in as mathematical modelers, like across the field. So it's kind of interesting to see how they were using it to assess the US food system and how she had been using it for various other problems outside of the food system. So these 3 courses together, we studied the food system, and then we took that broad perspective and tried to incorporate that into our study for the grocery and for the local scene. And I just thought it would be interesting to include one of the posters from fall 2019. That's that poster that you see on the bottom right. That's where the environmental ethics students presented to the math students and the Gateway students. And they were trying to decide, is it ethical to eat meat or not? And they presented these different frameworks from which you could view it. And that was a pretty cool talk. Just note that the date on the bottom doesn't have a year. There's no talk actually this Thursday or on the 24th. That's 2019 date. It's probably not even the 24th. So yeah, the point I'm trying to make is we took a very structured approach. We wanted to study the whole system and then bring it down to a local level. So what came out of that was 3 projects that were related to the grocery. The first, well, I should say first, we had 2 things that had to happen for us. They were necessary, and those are the bullet points on the left. First of all, the grocery, in whatever model we come up with, it has to be financially sustainable, because it's going to be a not-for-profit grocery. And the whole point is to offer these healthy options to the local community. And so it has to be able to sustain itself. Furthermore, it has to provide those healthy options. So those are 2 givens for us. So the project that you see on top, we call stocking the shelves, and that's kind of broadly construed. We focused on produce for that project, and actually the math students in Zahia's course were the ones that came up with the actual mathematical model. And what they were trying to do was take parameters that are given from the grocery, like how big are the shelves, how much space do you have for cold stuff, how much frozen space do you have, what's the layout of the grocery, and take those as inputs. Also, some things like overhead cost of the food, prices that you could charge. And we took that combined with local data, demographic data, that told us how much purchasing power does a local resident have on average? And ultimately, we want to make a decision about what we should put on those shelves. So you can kind of picture yourself as somebody that's running a grocery and you've just built it. It's brand new. It looks nice. The paint's just drying. And you walk in and all the shelves are empty. And you have to decide what you're going to buy to put on the shelves to sell to other people. So that's the perspective we took. And we were trying to predict what would be the best things to stock on those shelves. Then the future project, that's looking at, okay, now that the grocery is in place and has been sustained for a while, could we take previous sales data and predict what we should stock in the future based on what the prices we could set for those goods are, and then also what's the sales volume that we've been doing. And then the third project was tangentially related. It was about food banks. And we settled on a pretty particular problem that took, as an example, a food bank that packages food in a bag. So it's not like the people go into the food bank and pick whatever they want. There's prepackaged bags that you hand out to people or families that come up and accept the food. And what you want to do is optimize the overall nutrition that you distribute via that method. So we got another good mathematical model from that one. And we learned a lot about food banks too. So here are some maybe technical details kind of. So these are the types of math that the students used. And this isn't an exhaustive list, but it's a pretty inclusive list. So we had two basic types. We had mathematical models, which are the optimization ones. And we had statistical models, which are the ones on the left. And the statistical models came in many different flavors because there are many ways you can use statistics. So they use things like time series. ARIMA is a statistical procedure, regression, multiple regression, data smoothing. So they had to decide how far back do you want to look and pick data from in order to predict the future. And then the ultimate goal of that was to predict what are the sales going to be in the future. And then the bottom left letter, that's not a typo, that's supposed to be actually the letter R. That's a programming language that you can use for statistics. So the students learned and used that language. And then on the other side, for the optimization models, we use things like the generalized reduced gradient method, exhaustive search, which sometimes we call brute force. That just means you look through every possibility and you pick the best one. And our goal here was to maximize profit based on these constraints like shelf space, cost, things like that. And so the students in that project, they used Excel and Python. And there were a couple of different methods that we used, but this is a representative sample of those. So outcomes of the projects, we had these students work on them. That was 2 years ago. We've been kind of working on them ever since. They're not totally finished, but it's not like nothing's been accomplished. So the big picture for these projects, as far as where they are now, is the math is put in place. The programs are written and put in place. And there are two things that need to happen to have these be effective. One is we need local data. Like we need actual data from the grocery. And since the grocery doesn't exist yet, we don't have that data and we don't have the size of the shelves, et cetera. So if you want to make this applicable to a specific grocery, then you need data from that grocery. And also local demographic data to predict the purchasing power of a local resident. So we need, in other words, to specify what we have. The general model has to be specified to a local model. We need some kind of user-friendly interface. Like right now, this is all just computer code and math models, and it's impractical to give that to somebody running the grocery and ask them to be able to understand what's going on. So we need some kind of friendly user interface. And that's what we're working on now with these. So our other project that's going on, I'm just going to mention this one briefly because we just started working on this fall. We came across this project via Deborah this summer. She mentioned it, and it's been a great thing to work on so far. So just in case you haven't seen this in the news, in in O'Neill Park, which is in West Bloomington, they're putting in an aquatic center. And here's some of the stats. The city of Bloomington is the one putting it in. It's pretty expensive. It's like $12 million, but it's already been approved. I'll show you on the map where it's at. And actually, they're going to start construction next week. So you could go to the groundbreaking Wednesday at 1 p.m. next week and watch them start the first of the construction. It's also next to a school, Sheridan Elementary. And here's where it's at. It's the red circle down there at the bottom left. So that's close to White Oak Park. It's called O'Neill Park now, and it's going to be called O'Neill Aquatic Center that's put in. So our goal this semester with the Gateway students, which are the first year students taking my class, is to specify 4 questions that we can answer and 4 methods of attack that we think we can use next semester to actually try to solve these problems. And here are the 4 questions. I'll just let you read through those, but they're kind of broad questions. And what we want to do is make them specific and then kind of get a baseline that we can put in place through the next year so we can study what the neighborhood's like right now. And then over the next maybe like 4 or 5 years, study what's the impact of putting in this $12 million establishment right in the middle of a neighborhood that doesn't have one of those right now. So it's going to be a long-term study, I think. We're going to see how this impacts the neighborhood. Okay, so that one's just getting started, but more to come later. And I believe that's all we have. So thanks for listening, and please ask questions.
Well, thanks, Dan and Zahia. We appreciate it. Are there questions for either Dan or Zahia about the projects or about the approach? If you do have questions, if you could put them in the chat, that would be helpful. Jeff, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. You talked a little bit about it, I guess, when Zahia was talking earlier. Talk a little bit about what is the students' response to this approach?
I'll take the question. Oh, students just love it. I mean, this is what they want to be working on. They want to, as I told you in the math modeling class, they take it and run with it. And sometimes I have to tell them, now you need to stop, because the modeling methodology is they start with a simple model and then they increase the complexity so that they understand the role of each parameter in the model. So we simplify as much as possible, get the first model, and then introduce complexity, but progressively. And so after third model, I'm thinking about, okay, what we need to do next. I tell them we need to stop, but they keep going. They keep going. So in the grocery project, we had the first year student and the senior student work. Upper division student work together. And we met Thursday evening, every evening. Dan and I would buy them some snacks, and same thing. I mean, we would just stand back and let them, we would walk in thinking we're going to do this and that, but the student had already, they would take it and run away with it. So it's just amazing. I'm always impressed with the energy and the interest, and that's why we knew we had something we needed to work on and develop, because you don't have to push them to study something or read something, or they read it, they study it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would just add to that once you give students ownership, that's what they really enjoy, I think. So when they come in and see that in this class, they're not just going to be working through book problems, but they're working on something that they can actually see in the community. Like the students working on the Aquatic Center this year, they'll see it built next year. They could go swim at it if they wanted to. So I think that connection that they get, I think that's a good thing for the students. They like it.
Well, it sounds like the city has been embracing some of these projects as a way of justifying the expense that that goes along with them, because you mentioned $12 million. That's an awfully large amount of money to spend and such, and to be able to quantify the actual impact of those expenditures on the local neighborhood has got to be very beneficial for people in the city with that. Where do you think the grocery store project is at this point, now that you've done things with it?
I could take that one. So I think it's at a point where we need to get some people who have expertise writing code to get it to where the user could use it. Because right now, you almost have to be an expert in this area just to use the math model and the code that's written. So it's not very user friendly, but it could be. I mean, like in the future, I see it written as an app where all you have to do is update your what is it, your stockpiles in the back, whatever they call that for a business, the stuff that you have to sell.
Yeah.
That could be maintained as a database, and then that could automatically talk to the code, and you don't have to see that part. You just get an output that says, here's what you should stock on the shelves. Here's what types, here's how much stuff.
Okay. There is a question in the chat, and one that I don't know if you saw it from Suzanne. So Dan, Zahia, are you seeing that, and could you respond?
Yeah. I'm reading it now.
Yeah, so Suzanne, I would say for your first question, how to address the university, if it's our university, I would say contact either Carl or Deborah Halpern in the Action Research Center, and they're kind of our community liaisons. But it definitely wouldn't hurt to reach out directly to departments, like math departments. I think they might be interested in it. Other departments, maybe, it depends. University of Illinois, Chicago. Yeah, they must have some sort of place on campus that's the connection to the community, like our Action Research Center. It'll be called something different.
No, I didn't see that question. The Suzanne's question, were you involved in the decision-making around the location of the Aquatic Center? We were not, right? Then not at all. How would you utilize math if you had to identify the best location? Oh, that's a good question. Will your team be involved in determining, planning the opening of the center and the programming? Not that I know of. We would love to be part of this conversation, and our student at least as a silent participant, and but no. So how would we use math to determine the best location? Same thing. We would have to look at the area, the traffic, who might be using the area, what's needed to build that, right? So a lot of learning would have to happen on our part to understand exactly what goes into an aquatic center, what type of space, what type of access to it as well. So study all that, every real world problem is so complex, all the factors, and then decide what, and optimal from whose perspective? The users, the city, the people investing in this, all that. So look at different perspective and come up with the optimal thing. But I could see a lot of very good math problems there. Access to it, impact on various things.
Sorry, Zahia, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to address the question about the impact study. The impact study hasn't been done. So that's one thing that we've been searching for, is impact studies that have been done in cities that are similar, who have something like an aquatic center, or maybe even just some other type of amenity, and try to get some case studies like that so that we can kind of use that to model what we're trying to do.
And and understand exactly what factors enter into the equation. So, and there are a lot of publications on this, but the publications that what I found were written for the financial person for the fundraising so they're not exactly the type of information we need, but still it's good background information, especially in decision making. So what are the factors that enter into play when you're deciding such a huge project?
The question about lead time. So just to use the Aquatic Center, for example, we started thinking about that probably back in May or so, and then plan it over the summer. And this semester is, I would count this semester as still lead time, since we're still developing questions. Even though the students are working on the projects, we haven't started the math portion of that yet.
And we have the academic calendar that we have to follow. That's why the student consulting firm is something we're really interested in putting in place, because then students participate, but they're not tied. It's not tied to a course. It's a co-curricular activity. They choose to participate, and the timeline, they can work over the summer, and eventually what we want is to be able to raise some funds. We have some funds in our department that we can use to give stipend to students, during the summer to continue working on this. An example I didn't mention was a few years ago, not too long ago though, someone from the community, broader community, contacted us and wanted our student to work on putting together a report on this new composting method that they came up with some specialized equipment. And they wanted our student to study 2 farms that had put in place such composting system, and they wanted our student to make a case, to help them make a case to other farmers that this is the way you should do it. So they had a farm in California, an avocado farm, and a farm here in central Illinois that were already using all this, and successfully using it, and they wanted us to help them make a case. It was a fascinating project, and I mention it just to say that this was in the context of a course, the math modeling course, but the gentleman who approached us was willing to continue and compensate students to keep working on it, and 2 students chose to do that, and but they graduated the following semester, so I don't know if they kept working on it. But we have the calendar, the academic calendar, to students disappear on us during the summer. We have to have a way to keep them here.
Our consulting firm has high turnover rate.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, they're not the only business these days that have problems keeping employees. So,
Right. Yeah.
any other questions before we wrap things up? Before Dan? Okay. Saying none, Dan and Zahia, thank you so much for doing this and for the work that you're doing here in the community. And I hope I hope that there's some way that we can find a way. Actually, before we go, could you kind of mention your contact information? Both of you?
I was just typing that into the chat.
Okay. Okay.
So
That'd be helpful.
the easiest way is to email us, and we can give our emails, but if you forget them, just go to the Wesleyan webpage and search for the math webpage, and our contact information will be on there.
Okay, great.
Otherwise, we could probably just type our emails into the chat.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you already did.
Mine.
Yeah.
I don't know
Okay.
if you see that.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. But yeah, I hope too that the city can make use of, and some of the other governmental agencies can make use of some of the work in an even more proactive way in terms of making decisions and being able to justify expenses of taxpayer money and such. So thank you very much for what you were doing today. And Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Carl. And thanks all of you for always participating in these most thoughtful and I think fascinating discussions and breaking out of the IWU bubble, right, for students. I know that's always a challenge. So I think it's a good opportunity there to get them out. And, you know, we always hear the old saying about math and algebra, oh, you'll never use it, right? And not so. It's not so, indeed. So real world experiences, of course, I understand is powerful indeed. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I can imagine. I'll bet on the overall well-being of the community here on the west side with the new Aquatic Center. It's going to have some kind of effect. So again, we really thank you for that. So and thank everyone else for joining us, and we invite you to join us again next month on November 11th, where we'll be hosting Michael Seaboard, retired Eckley professor of econ, and we'll look at Bloomington normal labor market and during the COVID era, and we'll ask the question, are we any different? So until then, we bid you all a good day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.